Welcome everyone. My name is Riina Hellström. I am the founder of Agile HR Community and a pioneer in Agile HR. I've been working with agility for 14 years now, both in the management, organizational development scene, and also within HR. And I'm absolutely thrilled today with the guest, JC Almira, we have been working a bit together with him. But before we'll go into introductions, I'll just introduce Agile HR Community to you very quickly. So we have been around for 6 years now. We are a small niche player, a consultancy and a community who are focusing on bringing agility into the non-IT, non-tech space. We work a lot with HR people, and because we've done a good job with them, they have asked us to work with the business side as well. So we've been working with supply chain, sourcing, quality, hardware industry, and leadership teams quite a lot as well. Through that work with leadership teams, we have come across with JC and started working with with one transformation, and I've also worked with a few bigger transformations myself. So today's theme is Agile transformations. If you're interested in learning more about Agile in HR, look into what we're offering both as training offering and consulting, coaching, supporting your organizations. If you're keen in a low threshold learning, look into the book Agile HR. It might be a nice find with a lot of good tips and tricks and tools there. So JC, you are an R&D executive. I've been working with your leadership team a bit on a transformation together. But before we met, you've been having a long history and long experience in technology, in hardware. So warmly welcome, JC. Would you like to share a couple of words about your experience and who you are to everyone? And then we will start with our theme, Agile transformations.
Thank you for sharing that. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all. So I hope you can hear me well. My name is Jean-Christophe Almira. So I go with JC. I've been working in R&D for 21 years now. And global R&D, local R&D. I've been in assignment in China. I've been in assignment in North America. And for the past few years, I would say the last 3 years, so I've been leading an agile transformation in R&D where basically I met Riina and we worked together, which is the subject of the discussion today. So quite extensive R&D experience in managing it and also in transforming it. So
excellent.
Thank you for the welcome.
I think it's very fun to have you, especially because you're not from HR. And we've been working a lot with HR, and we want to also for this community. So there are managers online, there are executives hopefully here. I see some agile transformation people who are interested in this, and also HR people. So now we're bringing together quite many from different places to listen to what we have to say. So today's theme is the transformation, and we're going to go through transformation from different perspectives. And of course, 1 hour is very short, but we'll do our best to capture the best insights and ideas. And as we are both engineers and we like to know what we're talking about a little bit, we have JC has prepared a little bit of visuals as well to help you have visuals in front of you when we talk about things. So quite often when we work with, when we start with agile transformation, there needs to be a reason. Agility is never the goal. Agility is just means to get to certain goals, deliver value in a new way. So one of the themes that we're going to talk about today is why Agile, the why of Agile in R&D specifically. So JC, when your transformation, the big one that you have now been working with in this kind of previous role, where did you start discussing about the why? How did it come up? Why do we need Agile in R&D?
Yeah, well, it started by the word around us. I mean, that is continuously changing. And those two words, I think, that you can see on the screen, I mean, they are familiar for everybody. They are pretty trendy right now. So the mega trends about sustainability, and now we are talking about transformation in R&D. So what sustainability means for R&D was to make sure that we would develop products that are for long lasting, they are made of the right material, and they are taking the customer value for the life cycle of your offering into consideration while doing that. The second one is the one I would like to focus a little bit more, is the technology. So this is the technology evolution that has happened in the past years. So with, of course, the digitalization, the artificial intelligence, it is giving some tools for the companies to offer much more value and get away for some companies of the commoditization business that a lot of them have entered. So if you want to create more value for your customer, then you need to use, let's say, those nice and new tools. In the same time, those you can use those new technology asset, if I may say so, to improve your internal efficiency as well. And we will discuss that as well during this hour.
The trends with R&D, these are affecting specifically now. You've been working quite a lot in hardware. And what we see there is hardware, supply chain, sourcing, R&D, all of that is going through a very big transformation, disruption, if I even may. If you look at industries such as the automotive industry, I've been working with a couple of heavyweight industry, other kind of companies where they do machinery or parts to machinery or delivered towards agriculture and construction. They have the exact same trends going on, is that you're moving your value chain from selling machinery to selling value and value add. For example, one of the companies I was working with, they have acquired a digital artificial intelligence machine learning company just to develop solutions for their customers, and now starting to sell services instead of just the hardware. So there's a massive disruption, not just in the R&D space, but also in the commercial space. Any comments on that?
No, you're totally right. I mean, if you think about the line in between the hardware and the software, the digital it's basically fading away. And if you think about the new products that are coming from all the industry now in the market, I mean, it's not only hardware. So it is software, it is data, it is connectivity, it is service. So yes, there's been a shift, and at least from me personally, I've seen this shift starting 6-7 years ago.
Yeah,
we were much more traditional company that is shifting towards services using this technology innovation. So that allow us now to change the portfolio, if we may say so.
It's funny, by the way, how you can see the different, I'm not sure if you agree, but I've been working with a few different companies. Those who are far with this thinking already automatically thinking about how to add technology, analytics, sensors, whatever they need to be able to use the data on their hardware. And then I worked with a company recently, half a year ago, where they had trouble even making the case to the kind of traditional hardware leaders that they need to start adding sensors to their machinery to get real-time data of how they are working, to even be able to enable, for example, predictive maintenance or something like that. Have you seen this kind of maturity differences in these traditional industrial companies? Any comments on that one?
Well, at least the experience that I have, I mean, I've been doing this transformation for a company that has a lot of data that was available.
Yeah.
That was so the data was there, the sensor was there. So we had a lot of data, let's say, in our disposal to create those services. And the thing is that how do you use this data and to create value? How to get organized the data? So I think it starts by that. So you need to have the sensor, you need to have the data, and you need to think about, okay, how I can use the data to create value for my customer. But it starts by basically having proper data that you can use. So if you have bad data, then you create bad services, and it doesn't help anybody. So you need to start to clean your own environments, if I may say so, first.
Yeah, and then you still have that, how to commercialize that, how to conceptualize that, and how to price it so that it actually makes sense to build all that. Let's move a bit forward. So the scale of the transformation that you started working with your team around, can you share about that a little bit?
Yes, of course. So the transformation that I had let's say the pleasure to lead is for a company that's been 112 years in business. We are talking about 6 R&D sites around the world, and the size of the team where the transformation has happened was 1,200 people. So quite quite big organization and quite widely spread from a geography point of view, basically from China to US and everything in the middle.
And this is, so having worked with this a bit, it is a big mindset shift. If you look at the traditions, the history, how things have been set, this is a very well successful company. They've done a really good job. So how to make the case of we need to start evolving, how to make the case of we need to start shifting and start doing this on scale is very exciting. So talk about the transformation objectives. You clearly needed to have certain outcomes that you wanted from a transformation like this. So share a little bit around that, please.
Well, yes, of course. I mean, you don't do an agile transformation just for the sake of being agile. I mean, the words itself is, and especially for me in the beginning, was a buzzword. So those are examples about the objective of the transformation. It's I think, and it's in order when you can see on the screen, basically from left to right. So everything starts by the customer. So you put the customer in the center of everything what you are doing. You want to create more value for the customer. Then the employee experience was very, very important. So let me dig a little bit in this one. So employee experience in order to increase the engagements, obviously, of the employees. So the change that we've been doing, and I will come back a little bit later in the deck about that, was to empower, to get ourselves organized and in tribes and get experts leading experts, so that the organization is working by itself. They make decisions by themselves, so they don't need to create a very complicated steering environment that we used to have everywhere in order to, let's say, to grant milestone or to go further. So the people are much more empowered, enabled, but they are much more accountable also of the output. The third one, speed, doesn't go without the last one, which is efficiency. So they are interlinked if you think about that. Of course, when we do the transformation and you change the way of working, so you want to develop a little bit more hardware like you are developing software, and you change basically the operating model, the way of doing prioritization, for example, and the way of doing the execution. It happens if you are able to manage very well your portfolio. So you have a portfolio that is organized, that is prioritized, and the backlog that is prioritized. So that's why I'm saying that the efficiency is impacting the speed in which you are executing what has been prioritized. And this number that you can see on the top of the speed, 30 to 50%, those were the numbers that were given to us, let's say, as average of the companies that are doing transformation. And I have to say that from my own experience, the 50% is probably a stretch. It depends what kind of product you are developing, but 30% is possible, definitely.
When I'm looking at this, there's one thing that we try to teach people who want to move towards steering things in a more agile way, more frequent manner, more quarterly manner. And it's the stop starting, start finishing. And one of the things that stood up for me in this slide is the max 2 projects per engineer. So you're not dispersing your time on 10 different things, but you're focusing the capacity and not wasting time on that context switching. Could you summarize this in a couple of sentences?
Yes.
What's this all about?
Yes. So basically, we used to work in let's say in an annual planning, like we're doing this kind of annual budgeting, which is a whole way of working and executing the project, let's say in the waterfall, in the whole waterfall domain. So we shifted towards just to be closer to the customer and having much more check with the business lines. So to review the priority on the quarterly basis, okay? So on the quarterly basis, you review your portfolio and your priority. And what you're doing every quarter, we do capacity-based planning for the quarter. So you take the priority and you say, okay, project number 1, you check what kind of resource and competencies you need to get to work on the project. And then you you do the team up of the, so you put the resource based on the competence, and you start the project like this. And of course, by doing that, that means that if you have 10 priority, you can probably start only the first 3 one, which doesn't mean that you can finish them during the quarter, but at least you become much more disciplined in putting the red line, saying that, hey, here we have used all our capacity. Those items that are below will be treated, we'll come back to them in the next quarter. So instead of spreading the resource on more projects and saying yes to everything and delaying everything, we do less, but faster. And then, of course, then you execute faster and the cycle time is reduced for a specific project or a specific program.
Excellent.
But of course, you have to learn to say no or talk to you later.
Yes, this is what I'm kind of very often referring to. It's tough for leaders. This is tough to start steering like this for leaders, because it's your responsibility to make priorities. It's your responsibility to delay things or say no to things. You're not just starting everything and hope or pray that will be done, or letting people prioritize in their own teams with their time. They've got 100% of their capacity. If you add 150% capacity to them, they will prioritize. They can't do it all. So I really want to highlight this for the listeners. This is where Agile really makes the difference for leadership teams, is that they start doing this with a discipline. Excellent. Let's move forward to talking about the road, the kind of transformation. What does it look like? So first of all, for those who are listening, this is not a recipe. There is never a recipe of how to do Agile transformations. It's all contextual. You have to do your homework. You have to have people who help you set up your roadmap. We're hearing here one type of a roadmap. So please, JC, would you share what did your transformation look like? What happened?
Yes, well, I think the first thing to say is if you look at the bottom line with the scale, it does take time. So it does take time from the moment you think about doing a transformation and the transformation is happening. So you need to have a lot of patience. And as I was telling before, that Agile was for me back in 2019 that kind of buzzword. And yes, I knew that Agile was used for software development, but I was thinking, okay, but we are developing hardware that need to be tested, that need to be certified. How I can use the same methodology for doing that? So I think the first thing is, okay, let's try those Agile methodology to see if it works, if it's applicable for the kind of work that we were doing more in the hardware R&D. And this is what we started in 2019. And we selected a few projects for new innovation and as well from life cycle management, if we can call it that way, that had a multi-geography participation needed so that we could really test this global deployment of the Agile. So having the team working together. And what we have discovered, because when you do that, you break silos, you create cross-functional team and much more frequent communication. I mean, every day start by a stand-up. So we started to have meeting room in the different R&D units, where there was no table, people were standing, you had Kanban board and people were moving post-its everywhere. So this is the way that we started in 2019. And we continue for basically a couple of years and we extended the principle, but I would say very fast. We could see that for both new product implementation, but as well product optimization, lifecycle management, as we call it, we could see two things. That when people could concentrate, and we let the people concentrate without steering, letting them taking decision for a project, we could execute the project much faster. So even in the beginning, we could see those 30% improvements. But I think there was one thing that was very good, and I think equally important than the speed of the throughput, it was to see the engagement of the people. So you could see that the people that were working in this way of working, they were much more engaged. So they were really like, they were accountable, of course, of the output, but they appreciated also the autonomy that they had in making the decision, because I mean, I was one of those stakeholders that basically was playing in steering group meeting, Julius Caesar, having the step up of step thumbs up, thumbs down, you know, without adding any value to the process because the decision was already made. So when you cut this kind of bottleneck from the process, then you get much better results. And now we are in 2021. One thing worth mentioning probably that while we were doing all of those piloting or those testing to validate, let's say, the operating model to see if it would work, we started as well the blueprint design because, I mean, you needed to change the way, we needed to change the way we were organized and also in the way, in the what we are doing and also in the how we were doing. I will come back to that in the next slide. But after we have done those pilots, basically, and design the model, in I think it was in the end of 2022, we basically did the shift of the organization. So you remember the size of the organization, Rina,
Yes.
that we are talking about. So
I do.
we are talking about 1,200 people. And if I recall correctly, the numbers, 80% of the people basically had their role change, 80,
Yes.
which is massive. Then we created, of course, some new role. So when you are moving towards this new type of organization, suddenly you have Agile coach appearing, Scrum Master, Product Owner, Execution Lead. So those are kind of new roles that one have to create. And also I will come back later in the lesson learned because otherwise I will spend too much time on that. But I think what I wanted to say about this, from the moment where you do the switch, you have to do the switch in one go. I mean, this is something that you cannot live with two operating model in parallel.
Excellent. So let me analyze this from kind of a bit of a distance now, which is great to have a distance. First of all, what I'm learning from here and what I recommend very much is try to figure out what kind of model works for you. And try to do that in small scale, but still something which really matters. Don't start with projects that don't matter. Something where you need speed, where you need collaboration, where customer centricity, customer value is very important. Start at those places, get smart people together. And I know that you upskilled these people on a good enough level so they could actually deliver in this way. It wasn't, so they were given support, they were given upskilling. So you invested well in the first experiments. Then when you started scaling, you chose to do it as a one big bang change. I think it took a couple of months to a quarter, half a year to actually go into this model. And it's never pain-free, of course. There's a lot of things, firefighting, a lot of things that you also might get a bit wrong. You need to tweak and shift that, but that's what transformations are about. I would like to, if you may, JC, challenge you on that. Some companies are okay not to do things in a big bang. Some companies can start this kind of transformation saying, we're going to start with this value stream first, for example. We're going to look at this type of product family or with this type of a region or whatever and start there and then scale. Mm-hmm. You chose the method of we're going to do this across 1,200 people in one go. That was very bold of you. Is there something that, you know, what was the pros and cons with this kind of a change?
Okay. Well, you can imagine that when you're doing that kind of scale change, I mean, you need to be sure of what you are doing. And when I say you, it's not too much me. That had to be. So I think you need to have, of course, you need to have the high level, the executive sponsorship. But I think in our case, I have to say that there was a lot of, I would say, trust of on the unknown. Because if you look at those dates where that was happening and the date where we made the switch, so we basically were testing during the COVID and did the design and finalized the design and changed the organizations during the logistic issue, the geopolitical situation, the semiconductor crisis, etc. So, and as you said, that was a company that was doing pretty well. So, I mean, there was a big risk of messing up basically everything, and R&D being the heart of what the company is doing and basically delivering, let's say, to the customers. So that was, I think, a big phase, a leap of faith, if you want to call it that way, from the executive. And yes, it takes time to ramp up, to get used to it, but I think that we were able to roll it out in the right way. And remember also one thing, this was not an isolated, when you're doing that kind of shift, you are changing the way you are working. You are changing the way you are working with the business line. You are changing the way you are working with the manufacturing and the sourcing. So the people that are impacting by such a transformation, it's not only you in the middle as R&D, you are taking your friends from the business and from the supply line also, and you need to train them in this new way of working. So there is a big percentage of the whole corporate that you take along as well.
That's what I think is the most exciting with these transformations myself, is that you kind of start from a certain problems or needs or tensions. I call them tensions. First, it starts with teams and maybe in between teams and managers and managers and managers. Then it moves to a portfolio level of prioritization and leadership and executives. Then it moves beyond your own unit towards the dependency units or dependencies within that value chain. So it's very interesting what's going on when we start with these transformations. Excellent. Let's move forward. So this one talks about how it really changed from to. Share a little bit of your thoughts around this.
Yes, so I'll try to illustrate it in a very simple way. So on the left side was previously, on the right side is after the transformation. So the way to read the graph on the left side was that the site would be R&D site. So an R&D unit in a specific country. So the R&D units were pretty independent with certain level of competence, and let's say they were managing their own product. So basically, one can say that we would reinvent the wheel every time that we would develop the product. So you do the same work several times. So when we did the shift, let's say, changing towards this new operating model, of course, I mean, one of the things that we've done at first was to harmonize and simplify the offering. So because you cannot have global product team if you don't have global products. So there is a prerequisite that you need to have a part of your offering that is kind of that kind of global, and this is what is shown on the other side. So the product is much more important, much more global, and the competence is basically the same. But the difference with the left diagrams is that the competence on the right they could be people from all the R&D unit, just depending on your competence profile. Whereas before, the competence were more unit based. So this is the people I have in my R&D unit, I can use those people. Well, in the transform, let's say, model, you can have people from China working for a product in North America, for example. And therefore, the importance of the site is becoming smaller. It doesn't mean that it's really become smaller what the site is doing, but there is less focus on a specific R&D and more focused on global product. That's what it means.
I'm seeing this trend. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go. That's okay.
No, I'm seeing this trend in a couple of other industries as well, where they're speaking about they need to look at the architecture of the product portfolio before they really can move the organization in moving and working in a new way, because they need to look at, as you said, harmonization, simplifying the product portfolio, looking at modularization, so how interfaces are working together, so that, for example, Tesla is looking at how they are changing something in the production several times a week. So there's kind of versions of the car coming out from production where they have parallel ways of improving that already in production. So they're really re-innovating and rethinking about how to set up a product. It's very exciting and very intriguing what's going on there. Excellent. Let's move forward because we got so much to talk about. So before the transformation, a typical day for an engineer, this is what it looks like.
Yes. So basically, I was telling. So you had large steering group meeting that were making decision. It was difficult to take the time to agreed on the time, and then the project was very often depending on the availability of the stakeholder, if I may say so, for nothing. The prioritization was not done in the global level thanks to, let's say, the global portfolio, but that was done in regional level. But I was okay in that sense because the product were not treated as global. So that was okay. And then working on global product, it means that the resource that were in a physical location were focusing on this location. And the last one on the right, yes, of course, I mean, people from the other side of the world didn't know what, for example, Chinese colleague didn't know what the North American colleague were working on. So there was no visibility whatsoever, let's say. And that was before the transformation like this. And if we go to the next slide that is showing the typical day now. So we have global team working on global projects. The way we are doing the planning, so this quarterly planning that I was talking before, so we don't do quarterly planning per region or per geography. Those are 2 to 3 days quarterly planning days that are happening with all the teams participating. So this is massive, everybody together. And the third point was about the empowerment. So the experts are making decisions for experts. So when they think that they are ready, they just continue to do the work. And if they are not, then basically they know when to stop. So they were making the decision by themselves, autonomously. And if a leader like myself would need to know more about a specific program or a specific project, you have demos that are available, and you just have them in your calendar, and you pick up the product or the program that brings interest to you. You go to see the demo, and you basically get up to date to the status. And there is those demo meeting where you can ask questions, but there is not this kind of, okay, I need to know about this program, please do a presentation for me or for this audience. It was not working like this. So it was the other way around, that the leader had to go towards the people, the engineer, if they want to know more. And the last one, yes, is empower team autonomy. So that gets a little bit with the third one.
I love these 2 slides when you speak about them. This tells me, as an organizational development person, as a leadership development person, as a person who works a lot with leadership teams, this shifts the leadership mindset round fully. This is a full 360, 180 degrees change in how you view leadership. As in, I'm sitting in a steering group and you come here and make a case for me to do either thumbs up or thumbs down for whatever you're proposing, is to, hey, the experts know best about this work. As long as they have the constraints, the goals, what we're doing, let them do their work, let them make the decisions. If there are things that they need to escalate, they probably will. And there are people who have the responsibility then to help. But this is a massive shift in leadership skills.
And if you think that it's not easy for the people that need to change role to get used to the new way of working, it's equally difficult for the leaders to have, let's say, to have this shift. So, I mean, especially for, when you are a leader working in the control and command kind of style, when you need to basically let it go and just remove the roadblocks and create the long-term vision, and it's kind of it hits you like you want to jump on the project like before. So, but you need to refrain yourself. So there is also lots of learning from these new ways of working for the leaders, as you said. I mean, it's a totally different leadership style that need to be used.
Absolutely. Excellent. So if we think about the transformation, what it looks like, we've now talked about that there's a certain element of experimenting, trying a small scale and seeing what works. Then to start looking at how do we scale and what order, how quickly, is it a big bang, is it gradually, how do we upskill not just our own people, but also the dependency teams, if I may call that them. If you're in a certain value chain, there are dependencies. They have to know now how you work. So for example, in another client, I was speaking about their supply chain and their quality. Their quality said, we don't work in quarterly cycles. We have our quality processes that work certain parts, and we have a certain certification process, but they really needed to understand how the whole product people are starting to work. So they could then embed quality in the agile cycle, if that makes sense. So it's really important with that end-to-end thinking as well. Now we spoke about how this behavior shifts, and it's not just for the people who are working in these teams, but also for the leaders. I just love these changes because they are so holistic. It is very exciting. Here are some of the overarching commonalities, if you want to look at the operating models around agile transformations and agile units. Could you talk about this a bit?
Sure. I think the first bullet point, the first part on the top, we already discussed about that. So we were organizing this quarterly planning cycle. So you review the portfolio, you review the prioritized backlog, and you do once a quarter capacity-based allocation. And when there is no resource, you draw the line. Probably something to add on this one. The world is not perfect, and you cannot plan everything. So you need to reserve the little bit of your allocation as well, of your capacity, for unplanned activity, obviously. Otherwise, because it happened in all the company that you have some urgent things that fall on your table, you need to have also, in this way of working, the capacity to handle those urgent things.
The buffer capacity that we spoke about.
The buffer capacity, yes. So, and then the feedback and data. So you deliver more. So you do a little bit more as small steps. So instead of going with, for example, a big development, you do a part of it as much as it's possible. And thanks to this digital, let's say, developing service, we can do much more faster a minimum viable product that can be tested. Let's say we can test the value to the customer, and then you test the value, you come back with the feedback, and then you do an iteration, and you do smaller batch. And you need to be able to measure. And we put in place this OKR, objective and key results. And then I think those OKRs were very useful because you basically link the OKR to, you were mentioning the value stream before, to the corporate strategy. So you can have basically the same objective, but different key results, but you can really map what you are doing to the bigger picture of the company. And the way that, let's say, those tribes are showing their progress are through the demos. And then you have this last point about driving improvement. This is a constantly learning organization. So this is a very, it's a safe learning. So you do retrospective, you do experiments, you do Kaizen, and you have created, I think, a very flexible organization. You were mentioning this example of Tesla before. I mean, you can change the whole thing. I mean, you can create tribe overnight and put the resource, and that's what we did. Actually, we had a very big problem, and we were able basically, the team were able to basically put up people, take the right competence overnight, work on it for 2 weeks, and we heard there was a problem only when the problem had been fixed. And the reason why we heard that, it was because it was during the Finnish summer holiday, which are, as you know, there is no one working, but people managed to organize themselves, fix the problem, and go back to the normal way of working after. So that was just so brilliant, the flexibility that it could bring. And
what a story! What a story! And this is an excellent story about not having. You can't go to anybody else to make decisions. You just get together with smart people and fix what can be fixed, and be innovative, take chances. That's amazing. I really want to. Go ahead.
We were not aware of it almost at that point. It went so fast that the time we got aware, it was fixed.
How good is that? How good is that? You can be on your summer holiday and big problems will be fixed. The last bit, though, driving improvements, I really want, this is in the center of being agile, is to understand there is no perfect. We need to improve. We can continuously improve. We can find places where we can add, change, iterate, pivot, experiment. I remember when working with this transformation, I was walking around in the offices as well, where there was a demo ongoing, And it was a hardware demo, but they had no hardware there. They had built something out of cardboard boxes and a pallet and a pallet, and they had maintenance people in, they had some other people in, and they were talking about the different gadgets that were cardboard boxes, where they would be on a pallet. And that was the kind of quick, cheap, low fidelity, just actually professionals speaking together about the product before it even was built. So it's really cool to see this happening in real time.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. So leadership, we already started talking about that a bit. So massive influence in how, first of all, how you can lead a change and start helping people work this way, but also with the leaders themselves, start changing behavior and start behaving in another way, start influencing people. You said setting visions, setting goals, aligning, removing roadblocks. Talk about this a little bit, please, JC.
Yes, I mean, I think this is the first bullet point, being a servant leader. I think that's what it means. So basically, so you have to step away from the daily operation and see the big picture, and basically removing the roadblocks for the people. So roadblocks being a resource issue, a money issue. So and then you take care of that kind of, let's say, leaders problem, without basically putting the burden on the team, so the team can concentrate in doing the work. I think that was one very good thing about this shift as well from the leaders, is that we took a step backwards, or let's say elevated, I would say, not backwards, where you can see the big picture and you can think more what a leader should think about. So basically the big picture, the strategy, thinking. So not being buried in operation all the time, but you have time to think, to set up the North Star, to work on this OKR that I was mentioning. You set up the direction and also take care of the people competence. So we were organizing competence domain, hardware, software, let's say system engineering, and you take care, you make sure that the competence for the specific competence domain are developed in the right level. So you develop the skills of the people. This one is not very easy, though.
I'm remembering, the first point, show the direction, in how the leadership team also, we started working in a cadence. We brought in a Kanban board to lead the change. So you started leading, walking the talk and realizing how difficult it is when everything needs to be done, but you need to prioritize. Having big chunks of work also regarding change management, communication, org change, and all that. So the product side was handled on another backlog, but the change was handled on the leadership team's backlog. And that brought together, that also kind of connected you to see, we are leading this together. There's no consultants leading this. There's nobody doing this. No. We need to be able to lead this. Could you comment on that?
This is super important. I mean, so it's walking the talk. So when there is an operating model that has been changed, that can be used as well in the way you are leading, let's say the R&D in that case. So of course it was our duty to work like the team were working, and we did that with you, Rina. So we had once a quarter this review, and we're doing the plan and working the same way that a tribe would be working. So we were this leadership tribe that put the actions, and we had also our backlog to be executed in the. It was good. It was good as well to realize, to have hands-on work about what we are asking to the people can be used as well in the leadership team, and we are organized in the same way. So it's very important. It's walking the talk. So not just telling the people how they should work, but working as they are working themselves. It was super important. And also to get organized, because as you said, there was a lot of things to be done. So,
and I think that gives you, as a leader, that gives you the credibility to say, we're trying this ourselves as well. We are also struggling with these kind of things. We have problems with prioritizing sometimes. We've got conflicting priorities and we need to sort things out. We had some obstacles or blockers as well. So bringing that, we are in the same boat. And I really, really want to kind of highlight how important that is. And you did a great job with that, with your leadership team. So just aware of time, we are leading towards the learned lessons. And here comes the best tips and lessons from transformations a la JC Almira. So let's start with these.
Yes, there was a lot of lessons. So this is the best stuff of the lesson, at least the one that struck me the most. So I think the first one is pretty clear. So despite the fact that we have this everything goes together now, this digital and physical and digital, there will still remain differences in between the hardware and the software development. So of course you can try to harmonize and synchronize as much as you can, which you should do, but it doesn't mean that you can develop hardware in the same speed as software, because what you have to do remain the same thing that you used to have before, but you can improve the way you are doing it, which is what we did. The second one was synchronize different cycle time. So yes, thinking that one size fits all, it doesn't work, I think, and you realize that when you start working on that kind of way. So again, it's linked to the first one. So there is still going to be different, for example, release cycle. You can do release software every couple of weeks, but it's not a problem if you have a hardware release every quarter, for example.
Yes, this is, if I just may kind of touch upon that
Sure.
one, because
Yes.
this is not just in hardware and software. I can see this in many other companies where you've got, for example, banks, where they've got certain compliance routines that run every quarter, every month. They cannot go into weekly routines. It just doesn't happen. But the thing is that you need to find the touch points between the different cycles so that they work. And when I work with these kind of tensions in organizations, the more traditional or the slower parts, the slower cycle time units often have difficulties in understanding what on earth is going on in those agile parts of the organization. And then the other side, the agile side of the organization goes like, oh, but they're so slow, and kind of pointing fingers at the more traditional, more slow cycle time organization parts. But this isn't helpful where two sides are kind of pointing fingers. Is we need to understand why different units or different parts of this value chain is working in a different cycle time, and figure out what the touch points are so we can make the best out of it. Neither is right, there is no right and wrong, there's no new and old, it's just different needs, and we need to find the synchronized cycles. Just wanted to mention that. Go ahead, sorry about that, jumping in here.
No, very important point, thank you, Rina. Point number 3. I already discussed about this one. So this is the one, product development change have company-wide implication. I would say that personally, this is a point that we discover moving onwards, let's say towards so we didn't realize in the beginning that we needed that it was not only the change in R&D, but of course, more we were designing the model and more we understood that it was impacting over people and over functions. So it became this very big thing. Number 4, organize for autonomy. So this one means that it's not because you organize in product tribe, for example, that there is no interaction in between tribe. And this is super important, that during especially those quarterly planning day, the tribes are discussing with each other, because you always have interdependency, and one tribe can be depending on the other one, so they need to work together, but they need to do that in an autonomous way. Number 5, I think we discussed about that, so I probably will skip this one. Number 6, the adopt an always on transformation mindset. So for example, the example I was telling before, you learn, you do a retrospective, you adjust. And I would say that transformation is done. Long live the transformation. I think that would be the right word. So you never stop transforming. So there is not a end to the transformation. You are constantly, it's a flexible organization that need to evolve, but you are much more flexible and you can do the change in a much faster way. Number 7 is, I was telling that do not underestimate, the upfront preparation. I mean, there is some enablers that need to be in place. So for example, in order to be efficient, you need to have a portfolio tool. you need to have a backlog tool. And when I said you need to have, you need to make sure that all your team use the same backlog, the same portfolio. So there is some investments that are needed in order to change the model like this. So you cannot change if you don't have that in place. So therefore, you need to have, of course, to know that you need to have some tools to be invested in before you are starting the project. And you need to move the backlog from one tool to the other, for example. It requires time. So it's not happening by itself.
So this is one thing which is, I'm kind of on the fence here. Sometimes I feel like, okay, can we just from the start agree that everybody uses the same tool for backlog management? Because later on, it's much easier to build a portfolio level view and visibility into that. The agile part of me says, no, let's give teams the freedom to use whatever tool brings value to them. But then when we come to the point in a transformation where we start seeing scaling and wanting to do portfolio prioritization at a higher level, it's a mess going from 15 different ways of using backlogs to one tool. So it's a massive effort to do that. So I'm on the fence there, but interesting discussion. Yes. Thank you. What about number 8?
Number 8, of course, be prepared for the cultural differences, especially in your transformation is impacting different geography. I mean, let's take an example of empowerments. You let the team decide by themselves. I mean, you can imagine that there are some region of the world that are more inclined to, okay, they take it and they execute it, like, for example, Finland or North America or Italy, there is no problem. But then when you go to India or China, for example, this empowerment can be a little bit, I would say, it's not stop, but slow down, because people feel not comfortable in the accountability that is given to them. So you always have the leader that need to take the decision. So if I take the decision myself, what does it mean? What does it mean if I am accountable of the output? So you need to take that into consideration as well in the design. That's super important. And this is one of the things that you don't realize before you are deploying the model, obviously.
This is quite interesting, in my opinion. It has to do with the long-lived culture, because some of the culture are more social and not that individual. It is more around the group. It is more around the hierarchies that have been there for hundreds of years. So this is actually challenging many cultures to rethink how we work. And we might need small tweaks here and there to make it work in these cultures where there is a high hierarchy from the beginning. Yeah, very, very important. Yes. Excellent. Thank you. Last one.
And the last point, I already discussed about it, at least for us, it was easier to make the switch overnight than working in an hybrid model, because working in an hybrid model, that would have been confusing, especially for the people, for the other functions. So why I'm working still the whole way, why these other people are working in this other way. And then you might be the same person working on 2 projects with 2 different operating models, and that's not good. So you need to be bold when you are convinced that it would work. At least I personally recommend to do the switch, let's say, in one shot.
I absolutely adore that last one. One of the HR teams that I was working with said the same thing. At some point, they realized they got double steering going on. They got double decision-making, double steering, and they needed to kind of rip the Band-Aid off and just say, we're going to stop with these kind of the waterfall steering groups and just go into the agile steering. I am absolutely so glad we had this conversation. I hope that the people online have learned a lot from this exciting story. There are very few transformations that are done on this scale, which are global, across different units, across different cultures, and there's a lot to learn from these ones. JC, of yourself as a leader, would you dare to say a couple of things that you have seen change in yourself as a leader as a result of this change? Is there something that you can mention here?
Of course. I mean, okay, it's changed as I have changed as a leader. Let's say I needed to adapt myself to this changing leadership style. And I would say that it's hard to get your hands off when you work almost 20 years in one way, deep in operational. It's very hard to let it go. But when you let it go, you have time to focus on other things, such as the bigger picture. And I think this is in the end what the leader need to do, to see the bigger picture, to work on the strategy, to help the other leaders work around. And I think it was not an easy shift, but that's a shift that brings a lot of joy. Let's say, I would say this is super good. And anyway, the people, they are the one that do the thing. They are the experts. So they don't need, again, the leaders to be always whispering, like breathing behind their ears all the time. So they are much more accountable. People wants to take, let's say, they are able to take it. So this is, but the change behavior of the leader is not to be underestimated, because when it hits you, it's it takes a while to get used to it. But I think now I've been working lots of months now, actually a couple of years with this new leadership style, and this is good because we can think a little bit bigger. We can think
Excellent.
as leader need to think. So
a warm thank you, JC, for being here with us. I am absolutely honored to have been working with you around this. And thank you everyone who have joined us for this hour. If you're interested in having some support for these kind of transformations, we are happy also to be supporting, even if our name is Agile HR Community, we do a lot of work with leadership teams with transformations on the business side as well. Thank you so much, JC, and everyone. Have a fantastic spring. Our next meetup is going to be around the North American HR leader of Mercedes-Benz, talking about what it looks like from a HR perspective in the automotive industry moving towards Agile. And they have also taken in an Agile experience, an Agile operating model. See you all there. Have a fantastic evening, day, or night. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.